The breaking point. Commander James Rotterdam stood on the observation deck of the TSS Valiant, his eyes fixed on the swirling nebula that marked the boundary between Terran and Krillian space. For years of war had etched deep lines into his face, though he was only 42. The conflict had started over mining rights in the Celo system, a dispute that should have been resolved through negotiation. But the Krillians were a proud species, convinced of their superiority over the younger races of the galaxy. The Krillians were formidable warriors, standing nearly 9 feet tall with crystalline armor plates that grew naturally from their skin. Their culture revolved around martial prowess and the belief that strength determined worthiness. When humanity refused to abandon their legal claims to the Celo system, the Krillians had responded with force, expecting a quick victory over what they considered a soft, diplomatic species. They had been wrong about the quick victory, but the war had dragged on, consuming resources and lives on both sides. Through it all, humanity had fought honorably. They followed the Interstellar conventions, treated prisoners with dignity, exchanged wounded through neutral channels, and kept civilian populations out of the conflict. The Krillians had mostly reciprocated, and while the war was brutal, it had remained civilized. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell approached, her tablet clutched tightly. She had been Rotterdam's communications officer since the war began, and he had learned to read her expressions. Today, her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. Something was terribly wrong. "Commander, we have received a transmission from Krillian War Master Vorketh. It came with attached files. Command wants you to review them immediately, sir. They recommend you have someone with you when you do." Rotterdam took the tablet, dismissing her with a nod. He had seen war in all its horror. He had pulled dying soldiers from burning ships and signed letters to families who would never see their loved ones again. Whatever was in these files, he could handle it alone. The message from Vorketh was brief and written in the formal diplomatic language both species used. "Commander Rotterdam, your species has persisted longer than anticipated. This is due to your lack of understanding regarding true warfare. The prisoners from your transport vessel Haven's Promise have been processed according to Krillian tradition. There will be no exchange. There will be no negotiation. Withdraw from the Celo system within 10 cycles, or more of your kind will share their fate. War Master Vorketh, Supreme Commander of the Eastern Fleets." Rotterdam's jaw tightened. The Haven's Promise was a medical transport, clearly marked with the protected symbols recognized throughout the galaxy. It had been carrying 523 people, 387 medical personnel and 136 wounded soldiers being evacuated for treatment. The ship had been captured 3 weeks ago near the Helios Belt. He had been preparing the paperwork for a prisoner exchange. He opened the first video file. What he saw in the next 18 minutes would haunt him for the rest of his life. The footage showed a large detention facility. Medical staff in their distinctive white uniforms with red crosses were lined up in rows, forced to kneel on the cold metal floor. Krillian soldiers stood behind them, their ceremonial execution blades drawn. The camera focused on individual faces. A young nurse, barely 25, whispered prayers. An older doctor tried to comfort the person next to him. A surgeon who had saved countless lives on both sides stared ahead with defiant dignity. The executions were methodical. One by one, the medical staff fell. No mercy was shown. No pleas were heard. The wounded soldiers came next. Some tried to fight despite their injuries. Others could barely stand. None survived. War Master Vorketh appeared at the end of the recording. His crystalline armor gleamed under the harsh lights as he stood among the bodies. "This is the fate of those who opposed the Krillian Empire. Your females were weak. Your males were weaker. Your compassion is your greatest flaw. Surrender now, and we will grant your civilians swift deaths rather than prolonged suffering." Rotterdam watched the entire recording twice. His hands did not shake. His face showed no emotion. But something fundamental had changed inside him. For 4 years, he had fought with restraint, always mindful of the rules that separated war from massacre. He had believed in the conventions, in the idea that even enemies could maintain dignity and honor. That belief was now ashes. He opened a secure channel that connected directly to Earth's High Command Center, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. It was a line that had been installed at the start of the war but never used. The authorization code required for what he was about to request had been given to only 7 people in human space. "This is Commander James Rotterdam, authorization code Harbinger 9 Alpha. I am requesting immediate activation of Protocol Nightfall. Confirm receipt." There was a long pause. Then a voice responded, old and heavy with understanding. "Protocol Nightfall confirmed, Commander. Fleet Admiral Chen will contact you within the hour. God help us all." Rotterdam terminated the connection. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, War Master Vorketh was celebrating what he thought was a victory. He believed he had broken humanity's spirit. He believed he had demonstrated Krillian superiority. He had no idea what he had just awakened. Within hours, the news spread across human space like wildfire through a dry forest. Despite every security protocol, the recordings leaked. Families learned that their daughters, sisters, mothers, and wives had been murdered. The footage appeared on news networks, on social media, on every screen in human territory. The galaxy watched as humanity saw what had been done to their people. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Protests erupted in every major city on Earth and across the colonies. People demanded action. They demanded justice. They demanded blood. The Interstellar Assembly convened an emergency session, but their measured calls for diplomatic solutions fell on deaf ears. Humanity was done with diplomacy. Fleet Admiral Catherine Chen appeared before the Terran Defense Council in Geneva. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human world, and every face showed the same expression: cold fury. Admiral Chen had commanded fleets for 30 years. She had negotiated treaties, prevented conflicts, and always advocated for peaceful solutions. Today, she stood before the council with a single recommendation. Protocol Nightfall. Full activation. No limitations. The room erupted in discussion. Protocol Nightfall was humanity's ultimate contingency plan. It had been developed in secret over 2 centuries, a response to the fear that one day, humanity might face an existential threat from a hostile alien species. The protocol contained weapons, tactics, and strategies that humanity had deliberately chosen not to use. They were capabilities that violated the spirit, if not the letter, of interstellar law. Counselor Martinez from the Mars colony spoke first. Protocol Nightfall was designed for species attempting genocide against humanity. The Krillians killed 523 people. It is an atrocity, but is it enough to justify unleashing everything we have hidden? Admiral Chen's response was measured but firm. Counselor, 523 of our people were executed on camera as a message of intimidation. They were medical personnel protected under every convention we have signed. If we do not respond with overwhelming force, every aggressive species in the galaxy will see this as permission. Today it is 523. Tomorrow it could be 523,000. This is an existential threat. It is simply moving slowly enough that we can stop it before it reaches that point. The debate lasted 12 hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Protocol Nightfall would be activated. The galaxy would see what humanity had been holding back. Something strange happened across human territory over the next 45 days. Trade ships stopped flying their regular routes. Communication channels that had buzzed with constant chatter went silent. Border stations that had been busy hubs of activity became ghost towns. Humanity withdrew completely, pulling back from the galaxy like a tide retreating before a tsunami. The Krillians noticed immediately. War Master Vorkith sent additional broadcasts mocking human cowardice. The Interstellar Assembly sent concerned inquiries about the disruption to galactic commerce. Other species watched with growing unease, unsure what humanity was planning. No one answered their questions. For 45 days, humanity said nothing. Behind that silence, something massive was taking shape. Every human warship in existence received new orders and new equipment. Reserve fleets that had been mothballed for decades were brought online with crews working around the clock. Factories that had been producing civilian goods converted to military production overnight. Research facilities opened sealed vaults and retrieved technologies that had been locked away for generations. Commander Rotterdam spent those 45 days in constant motion. He visited shipyards where his ships were being retrofitted with weapon systems the Krillians had never encountered. He met with soldiers who had requested transfers to combat units, their eyes burning with the need for justice. He reviewed tactical plans that would have been considered unconscionable 6 weeks ago. On the 38th day, he visited a classified training facility on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. There, he met with Ghost Division, humanity's most elite special operations force. These soldiers had been trained since adolescence for impossible missions. They were faster, stronger, and more capable than standard troops, enhanced through genetic modifications that humanity had developed but never widely implemented. Colonel Marcus Webb commanded Ghost Division. He was a man in his mid-30s with eyes that seemed to look through rather than at people. Commander Rotterdam, Ghost Division is ready for deployment. We understand the mission parameters. Total elimination of Krillian military capability and capture of all individuals involved in the Haven's Promise atrocity. Rotterdam nodded slowly. Rules of engagement? Webb's expression did not change. Protocol Nightfall has only one rule, sir. Win. Anything else is left to our discretion. On the 45th day, the silence ended. Commander Rotterdam stood on the bridge of the TSS Valiant as the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled emerged from hyperspace at the Krillian border. 412 capital ships, each one retrofitted with technologies the galaxy had never seen. Behind them came 3,000 support vessels, carrying troops, supplies, and equipment for an extended campaign. Rotterdam opened a communication channel that broadcast across every frequency used by the Interstellar Assembly. His message was heard on 1,000 worlds by 1 billion beings. This is Commander James Rotterdam of the Terran Defense Force. 45 days ago, the Krillian Empire murdered 523 prisoners of war in violation of every law of civilized conduct. They executed medical personnel who had dedicated their lives to healing. They broadcast their atrocity as a message of intimidation. They believed we would surrender. They were wrong. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the galaxy. The interstellar conventions exist because civilized species agree to limit the horrors of war. The Krillians have chosen to abandon those conventions. Very well. The conventions no longer apply. What happens next is a direct result of their choice. We asked for peace. We followed your rules. We showed restraint and honor. They responded with butchery. Now they will learn what happens when humanity stops showing restraint. The channel closed. Rotterdam turned to his tactical officer. Target the Krillian military station at Helios Point. Authorization code Nightfall active. Fire everything. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, the military station that had stood guard over the Krillian border for 3 centuries was gone. Not damaged. Not disabled. Completely erased from existence. The energy signatures from humanity's new weapons left every monitoring station in the sector overloaded with data. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. They had thought they knew what humanity was capable of. They had been wrong. This was only the beginning, and everyone knew it. The Krillian Empire had awakened something that had been sleeping for centuries. Now that it was awake, it would not rest until justice was served. The Reckoning. War Master Vorkath received news of the Helios Point Station's destruction while reviewing reports in his command chamber on the Krillian homeworld of KRYSS Prime. He listened to his subordinates describe what had happened, then dismissed them with a wave of his crystalline hand. One station meant nothing in the grand scheme of the Empire. The humans were having their moment of rage. They would exhaust themselves soon enough, and then the Empire would crush them completely. 3 days later, his confidence began to crack. The human fleet moved through Krillian space like a force of nature that could not be stopped or reasoned with. Military installations that had stood for generations fell within hours. Defense platforms that had been considered impregnable were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The Krillian Navy, once feared across 3 sectors, could not slow the advance. But it was not just the speed that terrified Krillian commanders. It was the precision. Human forces struck exactly where they needed to strike, as if they had complete knowledge of every Krillian military asset. They knew the locations of hidden supply depots that were supposed to be classified. They knew the patrol schedules of defense fleets. They knew which commanders would stand and fight and which would attempt to flee. For 4 years, humanity had been the friendly neighbor, trading openly, sharing scientific knowledge, participating in cultural exchanges. The Krillians had seen this as weakness, as evidence that humans lacked the warrior spirit. They had not realized that the entire time, humanity had been watching, learning, and cataloging every detail of Krillian military operations. Every trade ship had carried sensors. Every diplomat had been gathering intelligence. Every friendly conversation had been carefully analyzed. Now that intelligence was being weaponized with devastating effect. Commander Rotterdam directed Operation Steel Judgment from the bridge of the Valiant. He slept in 3-hour shifts and ate whatever his staff placed in front of him. His hair had begun to show streaks of gray that had not been there before. His eyes had developed a hardness that made junior officers uncomfortable. But his mind remained sharp, calculating every move to maximize damage to Krillian military capability while minimizing human casualties. On the 18th day of the campaign, he received a communication request from the Interstellar Assembly. Ambassador Threll appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes blinking in the peculiar pattern that indicated distress among his species. The ambassador was a career diplomat who had spent decades managing conflicts between younger species. Commander Rotterdam, the Assembly is gravely concerned about your current military operations. You have violated 14 separate articles of the Interstellar Conventions. We demand an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to diplomatic channels. Rotterdam looked at the ambassador for a long moment before responding. Ambassador Threll, where was the Assembly when 523 of my people were being murdered? Where were your demands for justice? Where were your sanctions against the Krillian Empire? Threll shifted uncomfortably, his scales changing color slightly. The assembly was preparing a formal condemnation. These processes require time for proper deliberation and consensus building. Our people did not have time, Ambassador. They had 18 minutes. That is how long it took to execute them all. So you will forgive me if I do not wait for your committees to finish their deliberations. The ambassador's voice took on a harder edge. The Assembly has the authority to impose severe sanctions on humanity. We could isolate Earth from all galactic trade and diplomatic relations. Rotterdam leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that made the ambassador's scales ripple with involuntary fear. Ambassador, let me explain something that your species and every other species in this galaxy needs to understand. For 200 years since we joined the galactic community, humanity has been a model citizen. We have traded fairly, honored our agreements, and followed every rule placed before us. We did this by choice, not because we were weak or afraid, but because we believed it was right. He gestured toward his tactical display where icons representing human ships advanced steadily through Krillian space. We could have taken what we wanted from the galaxy. We have technologies your scientists cannot comprehend. We have soldiers who can operate in environments that would kill most species within minutes. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways, and we conquered it. But we chose peace. We chose cooperation. We chose to be better than our survival instincts. His voice dropped even lower. The Krillians have shown us what our restraint earns us. They murdered helpless prisoners and laughed while doing it. So now you are seeing what happens when we stop choosing restraint. If the Assembly wishes to impose sanctions, they are welcome to try. But I would strongly advise them to consider whether that is truly a fight they want. Ambassador Threll stared at him for several seconds, then terminated the connection without another word. The Assembly would send no more warnings. The advance continued with mechanical efficiency. War Master Vorkith tried every tactic in the Krillian military doctrine. He ordered ambushes that were countered before they could be sprung. He retreated to fortified positions that fell within days. He called upon allied species to honor their treaties with the Empire. No one answered. Every species in the galaxy had seen the recordings from Haven's Promise. They had watched Krillian soldiers execute helpless medical personnel while War Master Vorkith stood among the bodies and mocked human compassion. And now they were watching humanity's response, seeing capabilities that had been hidden for centuries unleashed with surgical precision. The Thurian Confederacy, longtime allies of the Krillian Empire, announced that their treaty obligations did not extend to conflicts arising from war crimes. The Selthari Trade Coalition, which had supplied Krillian forces for decades, suddenly discovered that all their cargo vessels were needed elsewhere. The Morthak clans, who had fought alongside Krillian warriors in previous conflicts, sent a simple message: you are on your own. One by one, the Empire's allies found reasons to look away. War Master Vorkith found himself alone, watching his empire crumble as the human fleet advanced relentlessly toward KRYSS Prime. On the 53rd day of Operation Steel Judgment, human forces reached the Krillian home world. The Empire's last fleet gathered to defend it, 278 warships crewed by the best officers in the Krillian military. They knew they were outmatched. They knew victory was impossible. But Krillian honor demanded they die fighting rather than surrender. Commander Rotterdam gave them one chance. Krillian defenders, this is Commander Rotterdam. You have fought with courage, but this war is over. Surrender now and you will be treated as prisoners under the Interstellar Conventions, the same conventions your leaders chose to violate. I give you my word as an officer that no harm will come to those who lay down their weapons. You have 1 hour to decide. Admiral Krythax commanded the defense fleet. He was an old warrior who had served the Empire for 60 years. He had seen the recordings of what Vorkith had done, and it had sickened him. He had spoken against it openly and been threatened with execution for his supposed disloyalty. After 53 minutes, he opened a channel to his fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Krythax. Power down your weapons and prepare to receive human boarding parties. The war is over. We have lost, not because we were weak, but because our leaders forgot that even warriors must have honor. Stand down. One by one, the Krillian ships lowered their shields and powered down their weapons. The home world lay defenseless before the human fleet. But Commander Rotterdam did not order an assault on the planet. Instead, he issued very specific instructions to Ghost Division. Colonel Webb, War Master Vorkith is in his command bunker beneath the Imperial Palace. I want him alive. The galaxy needs to see justice done properly. War Master Vorkith's bunker was buried beneath 5 kilometers of solid rock, protected by the most advanced security systems Krillian technology could produce. It had been designed to survive direct orbital strikes, nuclear detonations, and even sustained bombardment by antimatter weapons. It was supposed to be impregnable. Colonel Webb studied the bunker's specifications and smiled grimly. "We go through the geothermal vents," he told his team. "The system needs cooling, which means access points. They will be narrow and heavily trapped, but we can work with that." Ghost Division infiltrated the bunker over the course of 6 hours. They moved through passages so narrow that ordinary soldiers could not have fit, bypassing security systems that had never been designed to detect threats from within. When they finally reached the main command level, they found it defended by Vorkutha's personal guard, the most elite warriors of the Krillian military. The battle was brief and utterly one-sided. Ghost Division soldiers moved with speed and precision that seemed impossible. They carried weapons that fired projectiles that could penetrate crystalline armor, delivered electromagnetic pulses that disrupted Krillian nervous systems, and used tactical shields that bent light to make them nearly invisible. The guards fell without landing a single blow. War Master Vorkuth stood in his command center, his ceremonial blade drawn. He was a massive specimen even by Krillian standards, standing nearly 10 feet tall with armor plates that shimmered with iridescent colors. "I am War Master Vorkuth, Supreme Commander of the Eastern Fleets. I do not surrender to inferior species. Come and face me if you dare." Colonel Webb walked through the smoke and debris, his weapon lowered. "War Master Vorkuth, you are under arrest for war crimes against humanity and violations of the Interstellar Conventions. Drop your weapon and surrender." Vorkuth roared and charged forward, his blade swinging in an arc designed to decapitate. He was fast, his reflexes honed by decades of combat training. His blade could cut through starship hull plating. Webb sidestepped the attack with minimal movement, caught Vorkutha's wrist mid-swing, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that Krillian physiology had never evolved to protect. The blade clattered to the floor. A moment later, Vorkuth was on his knees, his arms secured behind his back with restraints specifically designed for Krillian physiology. "The thing about humans," Webb said quietly, "is that we have been studying every species in the galaxy since we joined it. We know your strengths. We know your weaknesses. And we know exactly how to exploit both when necessary." He activated his communicator. "Commander Rotterdam, we have the target. Ready for extraction." Above the planet, Rotterdam received the news with no visible reaction. He had imagined this moment many times during the long campaign. He had thought about what he would say to the creature who had ordered the deaths of 523 people. Now that the moment had arrived, he found that words seemed inadequate. "Bring him up," he ordered. "Make sure every recording device in the sector is active. The galaxy needs to witness what comes next." While Vorkuth was being transported, human ground forces spread across KRYSS Prime with surgical precision. They disabled military installations while leaving civilian infrastructure completely untouched. Where Krillian soldiers surrendered, they were processed as prisoners with full rights under the conventions. Where soldiers chose to fight, they were dealt with efficiently but without cruelty. Krillian civilians watched in confusion. Their government had told them that humans were monsters who would destroy everything. Instead, they saw soldiers who stopped to help a child find her parents. They saw medics treating wounded Krillian civilians with the same care they showed their own wounded. They saw enemies acting with more honor than their own leaders had demonstrated. Admiral Krythax, who had surrendered the defense fleet, was brought aboard the Valiant for processing. He expected humiliation, torture, perhaps execution. Instead, he was shown to comfortable quarters and treated as an honored guest. "I do not understand," he told his human escort, a young corporal named Davis. "We killed your people. We murdered those who healed the sick and wounded. Why do you show us mercy?" Corporal Davis considered the question carefully. "Because those people who died were healers. They believed in saving lives, even enemy lives. They would have treated your wounded if given the chance. If we become monsters to avenge them, we dishonor their memory. We have to be better than what was done to them." Krythax was silent for a long moment. "Your species is very strange. I think perhaps we misunderstood you entirely." "Yes," Davis agreed. "Most species make that mistake. They usually only make it once." When War Master Vorkuth finally stood before Commander Rotterdam, he expected violence and rage. Instead, Rotterdam simply looked at him with eyes that showed no emotion at all. "You will stand trial before the Interstellar Court of Justice. Every species in the galaxy will see the evidence of what you did. Every being with a conscience will judge you. And then you will spend the rest of your life maintaining a memorial to the people you murdered." Vorkutha's crystalline armor flared with anger. "A trial? That is your revenge? You are weaker than I believed." Rotterdam shook his head slowly. "No, War Master. Killing you would be easy. It would take seconds and cost nothing. But that would let you die as a warrior. It would let your people remember you as a hero who fell in battle. Instead, you will live as a monument to failure. Every Krillian child will learn your name as a lesson in what happens when cruelty goes too far. You wanted to be remembered. Congratulations. He turned away. Take him to the detention facility. Make sure he is comfortable. He has a very long life ahead of him. The Interstellar Court of Justice convened on a neutral station that orbited a star unclaimed by any species. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to witness the trial. War Master Vorkith sat in a containment field, stripped of his rank and armor, dressed in simple prisoner garments. Commander Rotterdam presented the evidence himself. He spoke for 8 hours, detailing every aspect of the massacre. He showed the recordings, unedited and complete. He read the name of every victim, giving each one their moment to be remembered. He presented testimony from Krillian officers who had witnessed Vorkith's orders and tried to protest. When he finished, the chamber was absolutely silent. Species who had fought each other for millennia sat united in their disgust. The evidence was beyond dispute. The guilt was absolute. The court deliberated for 47 minutes. War Master Vorkith was found guilty on 523 counts of murder. Every officer who had participated received the same verdict. They were sentenced to life imprisonment on an isolated moon where they would maintain a memorial to their victims for the rest of their days. But the court did not stop there. The Krillian Empire itself was found guilty of state-sanctioned war crimes. Their military was ordered to disband. Their weapons were to be confiscated and destroyed. Their territory would be administered by a coalition of neutral species who would oversee a period of reconstruction and reformation. The Krillians would survive as a people and a culture, but they would never again be a military power. After the trial, representatives from dozens of species approached humanity with a single question: what now? They had seen what humans could do when provoked. They had watched a species they had considered peaceful and diplomatic dismantle a galactic power in less than 2 months. They wanted to know if humanity would use that power against others. Commander Rotterdam addressed their concerns in a speech broadcast across the entire galaxy. We did not want this war. We did not enjoy what we had to do. Every life we took weighs on us, and will continue to weigh on us for generations. We are not proud of the destruction we caused. We are only proud that we stopped when justice was served. He paused, letting his words reach every listening being across 1,000 worlds. Humanity has capabilities we kept hidden for 2 centuries. We did this not to plan conquest, but because we feared what we might become if we used them freely. We know our own nature. We know the darkness that exists in our survival instincts. And we chose, deliberately and with great effort, to be better than that darkness. His expression hardened slightly. The Krillians made a fatal error. They saw our restraint and called it weakness. They saw our mercy and called it cowardice. They were wrong. Our restraint was always a choice. Our mercy was a gift. When they proved unworthy of that gift, we took it back. He looked directly into the recording devices, speaking now to every person in the galaxy. We do not want to be your executioners. We do not want to be feared. We want to be partners, neighbors, friends. We want to trade and explore and learn alongside every species willing to extend the same courtesy to us. His voice dropped to something quiet but infinitely more dangerous. But hear me clearly. We will never forget what happened here. The next time someone considers committing atrocities against human prisoners, remember War Master Vorkith. Remember the Krillian Empire. Remember what happens when you mistake our mercy for weakness. The broadcast ended. The galaxy fell into thoughtful silence. 6 months later, Commander James Rotterdam retired from military service. He had been offered promotions, medals, and positions of tremendous authority. He declined them all. The war had taken something from him that could never be replaced. He needed time to heal, if healing was even possible. His final official act was to visit the Memorial of Names on the isolated moon where Vorkith and his officers served their sentences. It was a simple structure, a wall of polished stone with 523 names carved into its surface. Before the wall, War Master Vorkith knelt with cleaning tools, maintaining the memorial as he would every day for the rest of his life. Rotterdam did not speak to him. There was nothing left to say. Instead, he placed his command insignia at the base of the wall, among flowers left by other visitors. A holographic portrait of Dr. Sarah Chen smiled down at him. She had been 31 years old, a volunteer who believed everyone deserved medical care, even enemies. "I am sorry," Rotterdam whispered. "Sorry we could not save you. Sorry we became something you might not recognize. But I hope you understand why." He stood there for a long time, an old soldier saying goodbye to ghosts he would carry forever. When he finally left, he did not look back. A year later, a young Thurian diplomat visited Earth for the first time. He was nervous about meeting the species that had destroyed the Krillian Empire so completely. His human liaison was Lieutenant Mitchell, who had served under Commander Rotterdam. She showed him around Earth, pointing out the cities and parks and monuments that made humanity's home beautiful. At the end of the tour, the diplomat asked the question that had been troubling him. Your species showed such terrible fury during the war. Such devastating power. Yet here I see only peace. Children playing, artists creating, people living ordinary lives. How can you be both? Mitchell smiled sadly. Because we choose to be. Every day, we choose peace. We choose kindness. We choose to be better than our instincts. It is not easy. It is not natural. But it is who we want to be. Her smile faded slightly. And if someone threatens that peace again the way the Krillians did? Then we choose something else. We would rather not. We pray we never have to again. But we can. And now everyone in the galaxy knows it. The diplomat nodded slowly, beginning to understand. You are a very strange species. Yes, Mitchell agreed. We get that a lot. She looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, Commander Rotterdam was living quietly on a small colony world, tending a garden and trying to find peace. Somewhere else, War Master Vorkith was polishing names on a wall, paying an eternal debt. And everywhere, species who had once dismissed humanity as weak were learning to see them with new eyes. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity hoped it would never need to teach that lesson again. But if necessary, they would.